Welcome to the debate. So, imagine you're packing for a lifelong journey,
Okay, a lifelong journey. Sounds exhausting already.
right? And traditional education basically tells you to pack this massive, heavy suitcase before you even leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to just, stuff it with every possible tool, every map, every survival guide you might conceivably need. And you're doing this without actually knowing your final destination.
Which is a huge burden. You're just dragging this thing around.
It's an enormous burden. But here is the real problem with that analogy. The world's knowledge is currently doubling, roughly every 18 months.
Wow. Every 18 months?
Yeah, so half of what you packed in that heavy suitcase is going to be completely obsolete before you even get a chance to unpack it.
Right, because the landscape literally changes before you even arrive.
Exactly. Now, imagine a completely different paradigm. Instead of hauling that massive suitcase, you just carry a lightweight backpack.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
And inside this backpack is a highly advanced 3D printer. So whenever you face a real-world obstacle, say a broken bridge or a sudden storm, you don't dig through old tools.
You just make a new one.
Yes, you simply print the exact specific tool you need, right in that exact moment.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks. Today, we're looking at some recent literature that spans, academic pedagogy, enterprise training models, and clinical simulation research.
A pretty broad spectrum.
Very broad. But it all circles around one fundamental question. In an era where the half-life of knowledge is rapidly shrinking, should educational and professional training models abandon traditional just-in-case learning in favor of just-in-time paradigms?
Or does foundational knowledge remain the irreplaceable bedrock of true competence?
Right. And I'll be arguing that the traditional just-in-case model is, it's fundamentally wasteful now. The future really demands a just-in-time paradigm that delivers targeted, active learning at the exact moment of application.
And I will be arguing that while just-in-time learning is undeniably effective for immediate task execution, I won't deny that, it cannot replace the deep mental models, the intellectual exploration, and the foundational scaffolding provided by just-in-case learning.
Well, let's look at why that traditional just-in-case model is struggling so much right now. I mean, for centuries, education has operated on a front-loaded premise.
Because we had to.
Right. We lived in an era of information scarcity, so it made sense to stuff learners with facts. Things like the specific intricacies of the Hawley-Smoot Act or, the exact syntax to program in Fortran.
Just in case they might need them decades down the line because you couldn't just pull a supercomputer out of your pocket to look it up.
Precisely. You had to memorize it. But today, we live in an era of extreme information velocity.
Mm-hmm.
Futurist Thomas Frey points out that staggering statistic I mentioned earlier, global knowledge doubling every 18 months. Because of this shrinking half-life of information, just-in-case learning has become a rapidly depreciating asset.
You think it's depreciating that fast?
Absolutely. We are forcing learners to memorize paradigms that will literally be rewritten before they even graduate. It's wild.
Well,
Just-in-time learning, by contrast, operates in reality. Think about 5 to 10 minute microlearning bursts embedded directly into someone's workflow.
right, microlearning.
The mechanics of this are brilliant because it radically reduces cognitive overload. You aren't learning about a software system you might use next year. You are getting contextual guidance at the exact second you need to click a button.
So it's highly contextual.
Exactly. You apply the knowledge instantly, which guarantees retention for that specific task. And you eliminate the profound waste of the traditional classroom.
I see what you're saying, but I come at it from a very different way. I certainly acknowledge the incredible efficiency of just-in-time learning for specific, highly contextualized workflows.
Right, it works.
Oh, sure. If an employee just needs to navigate a new user interface, a 5-minute microlearning module is perfect. But I fundamentally reject the premise that just-in-case learning is somehow obsolete just because of information velocity.
But how can it not be? If the information changes, the learning is useless.
Well, if we draw on Sébastien Dubois' pedagogical framework, We have to understand that learning just in case isn't merely about hoarding soon-to-be outdated facts. It's not about memorizing Fortran.
Then what is it about?
It is about expanding the mind and building critical mental models.
But wait, if the model is built on outdated facts, what use is it? I mean, seriously.
Because the facts are just the weights you lift to build the cognitive muscle.
Oh, okay. The cognitive muscle.
Exactly. Just-in-time learning is heavily biased toward immediate action. It leaves absolutely no room for deep intellectual exploration, for, meandering through complex ideas, or for understanding the fundamental why behind a solution.
I mean, I guess.
My core thesis here is that just-in-time learning is a powerful supplement for task execution, but without the foundational base of just-in-case learning, learners completely lack the agency, the vocabulary, and the context to even know what questions to ask when a novel problem arises.
So they wouldn't even know what to print in my analogy.
Right. To use your own analogy, you can't use a 3D printer if you don't understand the fundamental laws of physics, materials science, and engineering required to actually design the tool you're trying to print.
Okay, well, let's test that idea of cognitive muscle against the biological reality of the human brain, specifically how memory actually works.
Sure, let's look at the biology.
The unavoidable truth of cognitive science is that we forget what we do not use. The decay curve is just brutal.
It is steep, yes.
Traditional learning forces the passive absorption of abstract concepts. And without immediate physical application, that neural pathway simply degrades. It disappears.
Over time, sure.
Think about the film The Matrix, right? Where Neo downloads kung fu directly into his brain right before a fight.
I know kung fu.
Exactly. That has become the ultimate, albeit sci-fi, ideal of modern learning for a reason. You identify a critical knowledge gap, you fill it instantly, and it produces an immediate behavioral change.
But that's a movie. But the principle holds. When an employee faces a problem, a just-in-time system bypasses the memory decay curve entirely because the application happens literally seconds after the acquisition.
I hear you, but
I see why you think foundational learning is necessary. I really do. But let me give you a different perspective. If half of what is known today was not known 10 years ago, aren't we just building mental models out of obsolete materials?
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are equating the specific materials used to build the scaffolding with the structural integrity of the scaffolding itself.
I think those two things are pretty closely linked.
Not necessarily. Let's look at the Eastgate Academy example from our source material. A high school student learns to factor quadratic equations.
Which everyone complains about. Exactly. At the time, sitting at that desk, it seems entirely abstract, arguably useless to them. And yes, the specific mechanical steps of factoring might decay from their memory if they don't become a mathematician.
Which happens to the vast majority of students. They completely forget it.
True, but later in life, when that student, who is now maybe an engineer or a data analyst, needs to understand and describe the movement of a projectile or analyze a parabolic trend in data, the cognitive scaffolding of algebraic relationships is already there.
You're saying the ghosts of the equations are still there.
The architecture. The specific fact may have decayed, but the architecture of understanding remains. This is where Dubois applies the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, which I think elegantly solves this tension.
How does he apply the 80-20 rule to this exactly?
Dubois suggests that 20% of our educational time should be dedicated to broad, just-in-case exploration. We need that 20% to learn first principles.
Okay, 20%.
Yeah, to connect disparate dots across disciplines and to essentially build a comprehensive map of reality. It is precisely that 20% of seemingly useless exploration that acts as a filter, making the other 80% of just-in-time learning actually effective.
So the foundation supports the microlearning.
Right. I actually think we can update your analogy. Just-in-time learning is like using a GPS on your phone.
Okay.
It is highly efficient, right? It tells you exactly when to turn left or right to execute the immediate task of getting to your destination. But just-in-case learning is like studying an actual map.
Which nobody does anymore.
Well, maybe they should, because if the GPS signal drops or a road is completely washed out, a novel problem, The person who only follows the GPS is completely lost because they have zero spatial awareness.
That's fair.
They don't know where they are in relation to anything else. Without the foundational architecture of the map, your just-in-time learning just turns you into a robot following a prompt.
That map analogy is compelling. I'll give you that. But let's look at what happens when you take that theoretical map and try to use it in the blistering speed of modern enterprise or, say, clinical realities.
Okay, let's look at the real world.
Because in high-stakes environments, the theory of cognitive scaffolding often just crumbles. Let's look at enterprise software. We have very clear data from WhatFix showing us unequivocally that traditional learning management systems, which are the corporate epitome of just-in-case training, are failing miserably.
Failing in what metric exactly?
In driving actual user adoption and competence. And they are failing because of software sprawl and constant user interface changes.
Software does change rapidly.
Yeah. An employee takes a comprehensive 2-week just-in-case onboarding course to learn a CRM platform. They build your metaphorical map. But 3 months later, the software vendor pushes a massive update.
Right.
The UI changes, the workflows change, the buttons literally move across the screen. Suddenly, their foundational training isn't just decaying, it's an active liability.
Because they have to unlearn it.
Yes, their mental map is telling them to go left when the system now requires them to go right. Just-in-time embedded guidance completely solves this by providing digital walkthroughs layered over the live software.
You know, I actually concede that point when it comes to software sprawl. Navigating a shifting user interface is a linear, predictable task. If the button moves, just-in-time guidance is absolutely the right tool.
Thank you.
But let's be real here. Enterprise software is relatively low stakes.
Well, let's raise the stakes then. Let's look at healthcare.
Okay.
We have a fascinating systematic review from PubMed looking at just-in-time simulation training. This isn't software onboarding. This is literal clinical practice.
Right, the simulation study.
They looked at training conducted just 5 to 30 minutes before a medical procedure. And the data shows that this immediate targeted training measurably improves clinical performance. It significantly reduces the time it takes to complete complex surgical skills. That's an interesting point you made earlier about first principles, though. I would frame it differently. If a highly trained surgeon, someone who has already spent a decade building that cognitive scaffolding, still improves their performance with a 10-minute just-in-time simulation right before operating, doesn't that prove that workflow integrated guidance is actually the primary driver of success?
I don't think it proves that at all.
Really? It seems to trump their generalized past training.
Wait, I have to push back on that interpretation of the data. Let's look really closely at the exact mechanics of that PubMed systematic review.
Okay, let's look at it.
Because the authors themselves explicitly note a very low certainty of evidence regarding actual patient outcomes and collateral educational effects.
But the time to complete the skills did improve. That's a measurable fact.
Yes, the time to complete a specific localized skill improved in a simulated environment. But we cannot conflate a temporary performance bump with comprehensive clinical competence.
I'm not saying it replaces medical school.
But that's the point. A checklist or a 3-minute video on how to handle a customer complaint works beautifully because the task is simple. But let's look at how that 10-minute pre-op simulation actually functions in the brain.
Go ahead.
It only works because that surgeon already possesses a decade of grueling, comprehensive, just-in-case medical education.
But if the foundation was enough, they wouldn't need the simulation at all.
They aren't using the simulation to learn how to be a surgeon. The surgeon already has the anatomy, the physiology, the spatial reasoning, and the crisis management skills hardwired into their long-term memory.
So what are they doing in the simulation then?
What they are doing in that 5 to 30-minute window is a mental warm-up. They are doing a quick recalibration to a specific patient's unique anatomy. It is highly effective at preventing workflow disruption, absolutely.
Right.
But it does not, and mechanically cannot, replace the foundation. If a severe complication arises during that surgery, say, a vessel ruptures that was not covered in the 10-minute simulation, how does the surgeon survive that moment?
Well, by relying on past experience, obviously.
Exactly. They survive solely by falling back on their just-in-case mental models, Just-in-time paradigms assume a predictable environment where the tool you need is exactly the tool the system provides.
Which isn't always the case.
Right. High-stakes environments are rarely that predictable. When the GPS fails in the operating room, you desperately need the surgeon who studied the map.
Okay, I hear you. Though I think you are underestimating how sophisticated these just-in-time systems are becoming. I mean, we are moving toward predictive, AI-driven guidance that adapts to those novel complications in real time.
Maybe someday, but not yet.
But let's take this dynamic, relying on a foundation, but needing that precise, immediate recalibration. And look at how formal university education is actively trying to reconcile this exact tension right now.
You mean the blending of the two paradigms in the classroom?
Yes, we are seeing a pedagogical compromise emerge. And frankly, I think it leans heavily toward the just-in-time philosophy. Take just-in-time teaching, or JIT, which was pioneered at IU Indianapolis.
JIT is a fascinating framework.
It really is. It fundamentally alters the traditional lecture model. Instead of walking into a room to passively absorb a pre-written lecture, JIT uses pre-class warm-up exercises delivered online. The students engage with the material, they answer conceptual questions, and they try to solve problems before they've been explicitly taught how.
Which usually results in them getting stuck or failing.
Exactly. And that's the whole point. It generates a real-time feedback loop. The professor reviews this data just hours before class. Then they tailor the interactive lecture, just in time, to address the specific misconceptions and knowledge gaps the students just demonstrated.
It's very targeted.
Super targeted. Let's look at the mechanics of why this works. When a student tries to solve a problem and fails, it creates a cognitive itch, a specific knowledge gap.
Right.
When they walk into class, their brain is literally primed to catch the exact piece of information the professor is about to deliver. And the results are undeniable.
The DFW rates, right?
Yeah. In introductory physics classes, which is one of the hardest, most abstract foundational subjects, this method reduced DFW rates, meaning drop, fail, or withdraw rates, by roughly 40%.
That is a massive drop.
It is. It forces students to stop being passive listeners and become active investigators of their own knowledge gaps. So, I'm not convinced by the idea that we must choose between the two paradigms, or that just in case must always lead. Doesn't the success of JIT prove we can fundamentally restructure education to be just-in-time driven, forcing students to rely on their own resourcefulness from day one?
That's a compelling argument, it really is. But have you considered what is actually happening underneath the hood of the JIT framework?
What do you mean?
I completely agree that just-in-case teaching is highly effective. But if we look at the underlying structure, it actually validates the just-in-case model rather than dismantling it.
How so? The lecture is literally generated just in time, based on their immediate needs.
The delivery is just in time, yes, but the environment is not. JIT is not students wandering the wilderness printing tools on demand with zero direction.
Well, obviously not.
It operates within a highly structured, forward-looking, heavily curated curriculum. Whether it is introductory physics at IU Indianapolis or, say, preparing for the general paper in Singapore's curriculum, the ultimate destination is strictly defined by an expert.
Okay, sure, there's a syllabus.
It's more than just a syllabus. We really have to look at the learner's psychological reality here. There was a fascinating paper presented at the Australian Association for Research and Education, the AARE, that looked specifically at independent learning in Singapore.
And independent learning relies heavily on that just-in-time philosophy, right? Students figuring things out as they need them.
Correct. But the researchers found something totally counterintuitive. The students actually showed intense reluctance and resistance to independent learning.
Wait, really? Resistance?
Yes.
So let's translate that for a second. What you're saying is we can't just throw an employee or a student into a new system, give them a search bar or a textbook, and expect them to organically figure it out exactly when they need to.
Exactly. Because true independent just-in-time learning requires incredibly heavy cognitive lifting. When a novice tries to learn a complex topic from scratch, their working memory becomes completely overwhelmed.
They just freeze up.
Right. They don't have the foundational concepts stored in their long-term memory to anchor the new information. It requires self-regulation, high motivation, and a massive tolerance for ambiguity that novices simply do not naturally possess.
Yeah, I can see how that would be overwhelming.
Without a baseline understanding, they don't even know what keywords to search for. The AAR study noted that for independent learning to succeed, it is not isolationist. It actually requires intense, continuous teacher facilitation.
Which sounds a lot like traditional teaching.
Exactly. The paradox here is profound. True independent, just-in-time problem-solving only successfully occurs within a carefully curated, expertly guided just-in-case environment. You literally need the heavy suitcase of foundational knowledge to build the 3D printer of immediate problem-solving.
Wow. Okay. That brings us to an incredibly nuanced intersection, and I think it perfectly crystallizes the tension we've been exploring today.
It really does.
We've dug into the cognitive realities of memory decay and scaffolding, the stark, fast-paced demands of enterprise software and surgical theaters, and the evolution of classroom pedagogy with frameworks like JIT.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. To summarize my position, the evidence strongly suggests that just-in-time learning, alongside microlearning and workflow integration, represents a vital, necessary evolution. We simply have to move away from passive, time-wasting memorization toward dynamic, performance-boosting action. The shrinking half-life of knowledge means that traditional education models are increasingly inefficient.
The struggle to keep up.
Exactly. By delivering targeted, mechanism-focused learning at the exact moment of application, we respect the learner's cognitive load, we respect their time, and we guarantee higher retention and immediate behavioral change.
And to summarize my position, while I fully concede that just-in-time learning provides incredible efficiency and targeted skill building for immediate localized tasks, it is a dangerous illusion to think it can stand alone.
The foundation matters.
It absolutely does. The complex, non-linear problem-solving required in our modern world is absolutely impossible without the deep, exploratory foundation provided by traditional just-in-case learning.
Right.
You cannot navigate novel, unpredictable challenges, whether it's a sudden surgical complication or a completely new industry paradigm, without robust mental models. And those models are only built through the rigorous, sometimes abstract foundational work that just-in-time learning actively seeks to bypass. You need the map, not just the GPS.
What we are finding, and where we clearly seem to converge here, is that the future of education and professional training can't be an either-or proposition.
It never really is.
True. It's likely a deeply integrated hybrid model. We need just-in-case learning to build the overarching architecture of a student's mind. You know, the critical thinking, the foundational theories, the vocabulary, the literal ability to learn how to learn.
Right. And we need just-in-time learning to navigate the rapidly changing specifics of the modern workplace, the constant software updates, and the localized procedural skills.
Exactly.
It is fundamentally about understanding the balance between mind expansion, which takes immense time and patience, and problem solving, which requires immediate speed and precision.
Finding that exact balance, knowing when to build the scaffolding and when to just hand someone the tool, is an ongoing challenge for educators, corporate trainers, and individual learners alike.
It's the challenge of our era, really.
It is. There is so much more to explore in the source material regarding how we scale these specific educational models effectively across different industries and how technology will continue to blur the lines between them.
Plenty to read up on.
Definitely. We leave it to you, the listener, to form your own conclusion on where the ideal balance lies in your own life. So as you head out into the world today, ask yourself, are you hauling a heavy suitcase or are you carrying a 3D printer? And more importantly, do you know how to use both?